Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, so go back to sleep, I guess, if you're lucky enough. All right, Friday, March 10th, 2023. Time for another show. That's our catch line. I just realized our big radio show catch line is time for another show. Okay, that's very exciting and compelling. And, here we are. All right, it's Friday. It's a great day to clear out backlog of stories or to read one or two very long stories, thereby leaving Scott Anderson scratching his head as to how to fill out a summary of what happened for the day. It's actually, I find that he finds that, you'd think like, oh, well, this summary will be very easy. You only used one or two articles. And then you realize, well, if you'd like to write more than a sentence or two, well, today he read this article and here's a link to it. Bye. Right? It actually makes it very difficult. But a lot of it is his fault because he suggests excellent long reads. And then I read them and, well, then what the hell are you going to do? Right? Well, anyway, let's see. I've got a couple of them put away for today and a few things that I grabbed this morning. The New York Times is very excited to push the story that Tucker Carlson has, or I guess, coming out in the Fox Dominion lawsuit. Now, some more behind-the-scenes communications from Fox personalities, including Tucker Carlson. I guess you could say he is a personality, or is a person, if you wish. And anyway, I guess his private communications are about how much he hates Trump, which is pretty amazing given, how often he tongue-bathed Trump and the Trump administration and their officials and their policies, etc., while privately scorning him. But I don't know I don't know how to take that because, well, I don't like the dishonesty, clearly. And it does pose that other difficult question. Well, if Fox isn't giving you news, then they must be giving you opinion, but they're not giving you the host's opinion because the host's opinion is that he hates Donald Trump and that Trump is a disaster, but he comes on the show and says he's great anyway. Although, I don't know, maybe I've never really watched Tucker Carlson much, only the clips that people have offered via social media. And I guess thinking back on it, I don't know. I mean, no one has ever sent me, and no one ever would send me a clip. It's a little self-selecting. A clip of Tucker Carlson saying that Donald Trump is great and he really loves him and that he's appointed by God to run this country and make America great again. Like, that might not have been something that he ever said. But even if he had said it, why would, say, Aaron Rupar clip that and circulate it on Twitter such that I would see it? It wouldn't happen. So I don't know for sure. But, I guess he probably thinks he's being consistent. I've never said I like Trump. I like some of his policies, I guess, or maybe even all of his policies. And I hate the person himself. That's certainly possible. I don't know. No point in trying to dismiss, what Carlson did, especially when, after all, the narrative is, hey, gosh, this is so dishonest. So, there's that. And I thought we might take a look at that, although that looks to be like not a huge article here. So we might be able to get through it. Oh, some fun spam phone calls coming through at the moment. 5 times that Tucker Carlson privately reviled Trump. And then some odd headline type construction, colon, and then a quote of him saying, I hate him, which that's pretty basic. And it's straightforward and simple and to the point. And I like that. And that's terrific. I assume that there's a longer narrative of this story at some point, and this is just sort of like the listicle that goes with it. But I don't know. Maybe that's the more important of the two stories. I haven't really combed through the Times this morning. Here's a great picture of Tucker Carlson with a terrible haircut, so that's good. And 5 times that Tucker Carlson privately reviled Trump. Here they are. The Fox host's private comments revealed recently in court documents contrast sharply with his support of conservatives on his show. Oh, by the way, I just had a great book idea. Given that we learned yesterday from Greg that Trump's latest grift is to quote-unquote write a book, which will feature a compilation of letters that people have written to him, which, of course, as we pointed out, would be a massive copyright violation. But anyway, who cares, because the law doesn't apply to him. So he's going to publish a book of letters that people have written to him. This, of course, reveals that there's a market for comments about Trump. And all I'm going to do is compile comments that people have made about Donald Trump. To me, to someone else, to the New York Times, whatever. And it'll be a nice coffee table book. And we'll have terrific illustrations. We'll hire the best people to illustrate comments like, I hate him, and then see where that goes. I bet I could sell more copies of that book than are really purchased about the Letters to Trump book. But then again, I'm not certain I wouldn't run into the same copyright problem. Anyway, Katie Robertson has compiled this. It's not a book. It's not book length, but it makes a nice pamphlet, let's say. Documents released in recent weeks as part of what's the defamation suit for, the amount of money, everybody? This is like the 90 millionth time we would have read this. $1.6 billion defamation suit against Fox News by Dominion Voting Systems have revealed extraordinary private communications and depositions from the network's star hosts, quote-unquote star, let's say, and executives. In those statements, many of them expressed disbelief about President Donald J. Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him, even though the network continued to promote many of those lies on the air, regardless of the outcome of the case, which should be tarring and feathering Donald Trump and everybody else, but, it's not that kind of a case, which is scheduled to go to trial in April, by the way. The trial hasn't even started. All these trials are taking forever. Proud Boys are still on trial. Another stupid, crazy-ass trial started recently, and I can't even remember which one it is. Lots of things going on. Okay, well, one host in particular, Tucker Carlson, appears to have a tricky road to navigate with his audience. In his private messages, Mr. Carlson, who generally provides strong support of Republicans on the air, repeatedly showed contempt for Mr. Trump and some of his closest aides. And that's always fun. And here comes the spam again. Same person, I guess, doesn't realize I'm not the person you know. I don't know you and you don't know me. You can stop calling any time now. All right. Well, at any rate, he showed contempt for Trump and some of his closest aides. Me too. Both in private messages and on the air, so I've been consistent in that sense. Let's see. In a statement, Fox News said, the fact that Dominion was using the contents of the legal filings to twist and even misattribute quotes to the highest levels of our company is truly beyond the pale. And you know how I feel about the expression beyond the pale. And if you don't, listen to back episodes. But then, and also, I feel like about the expression beyond the pale, like Tucker Carlson does about Donald Trump. I don't know. It's like I privately, or I accept in reverse. I on the radio show, I rail about it. And in private life, I forget from time to time that it even exists. So, anyway, here are 5 examples of Mr. Carlson's views on Mr. Trump from the documents. And now we get some quotes. Here we are from November 6th, 2020. So right around election time, 2020. As votes were being counted on the 2020 presidential election, Mr. Carlson texted with his producer, Alex Pfeiffer, fretting about viewers turning away from Fox News after the network called Arizona for President Biden. I think we remember that episode. Alex texting, Trump has a pretty low rate at success in his business ventures. Why that comes up now during the re-elect, that was obvious last time. Anyway, that's for sure. All of them fail, says Tucker. What he's good at is destroying things. He's the undisputed world champion of that. I think we already heard that story. November 10th, a few days later, on Trump's plan to skip Biden's inauguration, a staff member texted Mr. Carlson to say, not the one from WKRP, this is Tucker Carlson, to say they'd heard Mr. Trump was planning not to attend the inauguration, an important symbol of the peaceful transition or transfer of power, as they say. Carlson then says, I'd heard about the inauguration. Hard to believe. So destructive. And Carlson also saying, it's disgusting. I'm trying to look away. Oh, my. All right. Well, so far, not so thrilling, I guess. On to number 3, and there are only 5, so we won't waste that much time. November 23rd, 2020, on his interactions with Trump's team over Sidney Powell, a Trump lawyer, barely a lawyer, but a lawyer at that. Mr. Carlson texts with the Fox News host Laura Ingraham about Sidney Powell, a lawyer for Mr. Trump and one of the biggest promoters of the unfounded election fraud claims. Carlson saying, I had to try to make the White House disavow her, which they obviously should have done long before. Ingraham answering, no serious lawyer could believe what they were saying. And Carlson responding, but they said nothing in public. Pretty disgusting. And now Trump, I learned this morning, is sitting back and letting them lose the Senate. He doesn't care. I care. Okay. But he doesn't care enough to tell anybody what he thinks, but he cares a little bit. Like with his hair, I guess. He cares a little bit, but not enough to really maintain it and have it look nice. Even though the potential is there, but hey. All right. January 4th, 2021, almost at the important date here. On his desire to move on from Trump, Mr. Carlson texts with members of his staff 2 months after the 2020 election and 2 days before the insurrection at the Capitol building about looking forward to not having to cover Mr. Trump. Carlson saying, we are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait. And then last, I guess this was the edited down version. Interesting that they decided to take one word out of the headline. Remember when I told you that they were saying, he privately expresses his sentiments. I hate him. Well, apparently the entire quote is, I hate him passionately, which is interesting that, it's a nice little flourish at the end. Why they take it out of the headline, I'm not really sure. And then finally, the 5th quote here, January 7th, 2021, the day after the Capitol riots. And about that, afterwards, Carlson texts with Mr. Pfeiffer, the producer, about Mr. Trump's culpability in the insurrection and how to deal with viewers who still support him. It was 2 weeks before the inauguration of President Biden. Carlson texting, Trump has 2 weeks left. Once he's out, he becomes incalculably less powerful, even in the minds of his supporters. Carlson continues saying, he's a demonic force, a destroyer, but he's not going to destroy us. I've been thinking about this every day for 4 years. Pfeiffer says, you're right. I don't want to let him destroy me either. And then something's redacted here. And then it says, the Trump anger spiral is vicious. Carlson answering again, that's for sure. Deadly. Good choice of words there. It's true. It almost consumed me in November when Sidney Powell attacked us. It was very difficult to regain emotional control, but I knew I had to. We've got 2 weeks left. We can do this. Well, he's very excited about his own abilities there. And I remember nothing of the fight between Sidney Powell and Tucker Carlson in November of 2020. And if you do, I don't know, point it out to me, I guess, but he obviously thinks the whole world was watching, and as it turns out, no one cared except him, and he could barely keep a lid on it in having a public fight with Sidney Powell. And that's probably, given how crazy she is, I mean, it's annoying, but it'd be pretty, I think, reasonably easy to do for a professional person with a platform to, just sort of flatly decline to have an exchange with her. All right. Well, at any rate, there you go. I would say, though they promoted that to me very heavily and kept emailing me that I should be reading it, I would say I don't feel like I really was enriched that much by that. So, okay, we move on to other things that have been standing by in pocket that might be of more interest to you. What would a day on the radio be without the revelation or the reading of someone else's work to reveal another George Santos scandal? And at this point, the whole life is scandal. It's just a matter of what, here's a new phase to a different grift that he was doing that we haven't quite touched on before. And this one in Politico, as many of them are turning up in, but really wherever you look. Here's the Politico version of the latest version of one of his many scams. At this point, it's just sort of like these are little sub-scams. that we're finding out about. They're horrible. Any one of them ordinarily would be a disqualifying fault for pretty much, well, in the olden days, anybody else. But for George Santos, it's just like, that's not even exciting anymore. George Santos masterminded a 2017 ATM fraud, a former roommate tells the feds. Santos taught me how to skim card information and how to clone cards. I mean, that's like gangland activity at this point, organized crime stuff and Russian mobsters and who knows what. This is pretty interesting. All right, let's see. I'm kind of curious, by the way. Are we going to get taught how to skim card information and clone cards? I mean, I don't want to encourage anybody to do that crime, but I always kind of wondered. I mean, I can imagine what the technology is like, but, what I'm curious about is how do they teach these dummies to do it? I mean, they're stupid and they get caught eventually, although this guy, Santos, got away with it for how many years, I guess, before his roommate. The guy had to win a seat in Congress for somebody to say something about this. I'm just curious how many of these things require some technical expertise and people who, you couldn't pay them to pay attention to this stuff in school. But if, I guess, you pay them by saying you get to keep whatever you steal, then they get interested in technology all of a sudden. All right. Well, that's how I teach STEM to kids. You can rob people. Hey, fantastic. And I need to do this in order to develop my cadre of young hackers. I still have yet to launch the Privateers of the Caribbean and steal all the money, except it was mostly in Bitcoin, and that's like turning worthless. So I really missed my window on that. Anyway, Santos, says the ex-roommate, taught me how to skim card information, how to clone cards. That's from Gustavo Ribeiro Trelha, who was himself convicted of felony access device fraud. And when did he say it? Wednesday. And in what context? In a sworn declaration submitted to the FBI. And that's just the subtitle. All right. Jacqueline Sweet has the whole fully developed prose and everything on the story. Representative George Santos orchestrated a 2017 credit card skimming operation in Seattle. I didn't even realize he had a presence in Seattle. The man who was convicted of the fraud and deported to Brazil said in a sworn declaration submitted to federal authorities on Wednesday. Maybe he's just lying his ass off. I don't know. I'm coming forward today to declare that the person in charge of the crime of credit card fraud when I was arrested was George Santos / Anthony DeVolder. Gustavo Ribeiro, I guess. R-I-B-E-I, Ribeiro Trelha, wrote in this declaration. It was sent by express mail and email to the FBI, the U.S. Secret Service, New York office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, according to a copy of the receipt from the United States Postal Service. Well, there you go. Louis DeJoy actually delivered this. Telha decided, is that one right? Oh, this time there's the R is missing. So I think that's just a typo and it was Trelha. Trelha decided to contact law enforcement officials after seeing the newly minted congressman on television, he said in his declaration. And I can imagine, if it were true, it's easy to imagine, sitting maybe in a jail or just sitting in Brazil, having been in jail previously and maybe not having a satisfactory job afterwards, and then seeing this guy, continue to scam his way through life and even become a congressman. Of course, on the other hand, you could say, what am I going to do for a living? I'm a guy who was in the United States and I was caught doing credit card fraud and I was deported to Brazil and it sucks down here. But I bet I could get away with saying I knew this guy and make trouble for that guy. And then maybe, I don't know, someone will cut me a deal of some kind. I don't know. But, that's possible. I just don't know what kind of deal could be cut. So I just don't see the upside to making the story up. But maybe the guy has a radio show and he needed to fill time. I don't know. Santos, whose full name is George Anthony DeVolder Santos, often went by Anthony DeVolder before his first congressional bid in 2020. The New York Republican won a Long Island swing district last November after lying on the campaign trail about his education, work experience, and supposed Jewish ancestry. The House Ethics Panel initiated an investigation into Santos last week, finally, to explore possible, quote, unlawful activity related to his run. State, federal, and Brazilian authorities are also probing Santos related to a string of potential financial crimes. Santos has admitted to embellishing, quote, embellishing parts of his background, but said he never broke any laws, except for the one that he was arrested in Brazil for, I guess, but he says he didn't do that either, probably. He was previously questioned about the Seattle scheme by investigators for the U.S. Secret Service, CBS News has reported. So they know, or they knew, and asked him. He was never charged, but the investigation remains open. Santos also told an attorney friend he was an informant in the fraud case. Trella insists he was its mastermind. Interesting. And, that could be two interesting conflicting stories. One guy gets caught and he made me do it, and then the other guy says, no, he made me do it. But we'll see. Santos taught me how to skim card information and how to clone cards. He gave me all the materials and taught me how to put skimming devices and cameras on ATM machines. Trella said in the declaration that was submitted to authorities by his New York attorney, Mark Demetropoulos. I guess there's an extra E in there after all. It's like Demetropoulos. Okay. But D-E-M, Paulos, a Greek-sounding last name. Politico obtained a copy of this declaration. Spokespeople for the FBI didn't return any messages. Representatives for the Secret Service and U.S. Attorney's Office also declined to comment. A lawyer for Santos did not respond to emails and text messages for comment. Oh, here he is. Is this the lawyer for George Santos? Come on in. Tell me what's going on. Trella and Santos met in the fall of 2016 on a Facebook group for Brazilians living in Orlando, Florida. He said in the declaration, oh, that's interesting. So they met in 2016, a Facebook group for Brazilians living in Orlando, Florida, and then decided to do some crimes in Seattle. Okay. Let's see. By November, Trella had rented a room in Santos's Winter Park, Florida apartment, according to a copy of the lease viewed by Politico. Okay, so let me see if I can grab that information in my head again. I was listening to what was going on in the background here, and I still don't know. Trella and Santos met in the fall of 2016. By November, which is the fall, Trella had rented a room in Santos's apartment in Winter Park, Florida, because he was such a high roller. Anyway, that is when and where I learned from him how to clone ATM cards and credit cards, Trella wrote in a declaration that was translated from his native Portuguese. Santos kept a warehouse on Kirkman Road in Orlando to store the skimming equipment, according to the declaration. That's interesting. He had a lot of material. I guess it's too much to keep in the apartment. Parts, printers, blank ATM cards, and credit cards to be painted and engraved with stolen account and personal information. Santos gave me at his warehouse some of the parts to illegally skim credit card information. Right after he gave me the card skimming and cloning machines, he taught me how to use them, Trella wrote. You'd think that would go hand in hand. Trella then flew out to Seattle, where he was caught on a security camera removing a skimming device from a Chase ATM on Pike Street, according to law enforcement records. He was arrested on April 27th. So if you have been living in the Seattle area for a long time and you used to go to the Chase ATM on Pike Street back in 2017 and then had your identity stolen maybe, or your credit cards or your ATM cards stolen, now you know who allegedly did that thing. Okay, allegedly, so you really don't know anything. A spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Seattle previously told Politico it's not unusual for credit card thieves to go far from home to nab numbers, so there's less chance of the stolen numbers being traced back to the perpetrators. Okay, that makes a certain amount of sense. That spokesperson, Emily Langley, I guess, said she didn't have any information about Santos's involvement in the Trella case. At the time of his arrest, Trella had a fake Brazilian ID card. Like, why not? Fake everything. And 10 suspected fraudulent cards in his hotel room, according to police documents. An empty FedEx package police found in his rental car was sent from the Winter Park unit he shared with Santos. That's not a bad case, really. Trelha told federal authorities in the declaration Wednesday that his deal with Santos was for 50% for him and 50% for me. We used a computer to be able to download the information on the pieces. We also used an external hard drive to save the filming because the skimmer took the information from the card and the camera took the password, he wrote. Oh, that's a very sophisticated operation, really. It didn't work out so well because I was arrested, he admitted. That's true. That's not a great outcome. Trelha said Santos visited him in jail in Seattle, but told him not to implicate him in the scheme. I would imagine that's what I would tell somebody too. I guess don't tell on me. Santos threatened my friends in Florida. That's not nice. And I must not say that he was my boss, he wrote. Trelha agreed to say he was working for someone in Brazil and not with Santos because he was worried Santos would have his friends in Orlando deported, he said in a telephone interview last month. Because, of course, as you know, as a Republican, he's a hardliner on immigration, right? Wink, wink. Trelha recalled Santos warning he could make things worse for him since he was already in jail and Santos was a U.S. citizen. No, we really should have denied him that. In an audio recording of Trelha's on May 15th, 2017, this is a audio of his arraignment in King County in Superior Court. Santos tells the judge he's a family friend who was there to secure a local Airbnb if the defendant was released on bail. I guess you can't do that if you're in jail, but so he flew all the way there from Florida to Seattle in order to get an Airbnb for the guy if he got released from jail. Of course, you can famously get an Airbnb room over the computer, but hey, pretty interesting. All right, well, that's an interesting lie. We'll be right back with more of this interesting lie.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on, where the hell are we? Netroots Radio. That's right. We've always been on Netroots Radio. I felt like I should say that, so it sounded like I'm on so many radio networks, I can't even remember. But that's not the case. Okay, exclusively, maybe forever, here on Netroots Radio. Though, well, once we were on, there was a radio station that simulcast us for a while, too. So, you know, anyway, the point is, what? I was talking about George Santos being involved in another crazy scam, and this one rises to the level of major crime, if you ask me. Let's see. So in an audio recording of Trelha's May 15th, 2017 arraignment in King County Superior Court, there's this funny line about Santos telling the judge, you know, what are you doing here? Who are you? Why are you here? I'm a family friend. I'm here to get an Airbnb if the defendant is released on bail. And, you know, in Seattle, they should be relatively tech savvy, right? And say, why did you come here from Winter Park, Florida to rent an Airbnb if this guy gets out of jail? Because if this guy gets out of jail, one, he can go rent an Airbnb. Or two, we have these things here in Seattle that are called hotels, and maybe you could use one of those. Or three, you could have done this from Winter Park, Florida. After all, you were coordinating this scheme to steal credit cards in Seattle all the way from Winter Park, Florida. So I think you probably could have worked it out. But, judges are busy and they're just like, I don't know. Everybody in my courtroom is kind of weird and stupid, and they wouldn't be here if they weren't. So maybe this is the way this bozo does the Airbnb thing. Anyway, Santos also claimed to the judge that he worked for Goldman Sachs in New York, which is what he was telling everybody when he was running for Congress. And by the way, this is only 3 years before he's making his first run for Congress. It's not like it's ancient history, right? I mean, okay. Anyway, so Judge, by the way, what are you doing here? I'm here to rent an Airbnb for my friend. What? That's stupid. Are you a moron? Do you have a job? What do you do for a living? I work for Goldman Sachs. Well, okay. But again, here, I'm pretty sure that almost everybody at Goldman Sachs knows that if you need an Airbnb in Seattle, but you're in Winter Park, Florida, well, I'll return to that in a second. You can still rent the Airbnb all the way from Winter Park, Florida. But can I ask you why you live in Winter Park, Florida in an apartment that you share with this guy and are skimming credit cards? Well, we didn't know that yet. But if you work for Goldman Sachs in New York, I'm a family friend from Winter Park, Florida, who's here to rent an Airbnb for a guy in Seattle, but I normally work in New York. I think at this point I would have had the bailiff arrest him. I don't know what this guy is up to, but it's no good, and you should throw this guy in a prison cell until we can figure out what's going on here. But we don't do that in America. Anyway, that, of course, that he worked for Goldman Sachs in New York was a key part of his campaign biography 3 years later that he admitted wasn't true. Trelha was unable to post the $75,000 bail, even after stealing all that ATM money. Well, I guess you can't use that for your bail. He pleaded guilty to felony access device fraud and served 7 months in jail and was deported to Brazil in early 2018. So maybe he's done with his jail time. Santos did not help me get out of jail. He also stole the money that I had collected for my bail. I was wondering, now I can see where if all your money was stolen, clearly they're not going to let you use that for your bail. But wouldn't that be funny? So I'm here to start a GoFundMe to get the bail money to get this guy out. And he succeeds in getting it all, and then steals it. And then, like he did with all his other charities. And then, well, I viewed it as a cost savings because now I don't have to rent the guy an Airbnb. Wow. All right. What a pal. Anyway, let's see. Santos did not help me get out of jail. He stole the money I had collected from my bail. Wait, I also have to pause again and say that's not a huge. Do I really care that much? I mean, I'm inclined to feel bad for the guy because George Santos stole from him. But why are you in jail in the first place? Because you were stealing everybody else's money. I would almost say fair play. You're in jail for stealing people's money from their from their savings accounts. And then, oh no, you collected $75,000 for your bail and someone stole it? What a horrible turn of events. I mean, maybe that's the way it should be. Well, anyway, Trelha told Politico that before flying to Seattle, Santos had traveled to Orlando to pick up $20,000 in cash. He instructed another person, I guess is this his sister, maybe? Leide, L-E-I-D-E, Leide Oliveira Santos. Oh, no, that's another roommate? Okay. Boy, they got a lot of roommates, and 2 of them are named Santos. I don't know about this bunch of people. Okay, so he traveled to Orlando. Before flying to Seattle, Santos traveled to Orlando from Winter Park, I guess, to pick up $20,000 in cash. He instructed this other Santos, another roommate, to give him from a safe. Santos had promised to hire El Chapo's lawyer for Trelha. He said a third roommate in the Winter Park apartment told Politico in a phone interview that Oliveira Santos told him. So, wow, how many roommates have they got? Because that would be the 4th roommate. Or maybe there's some of them are former roommates. I don't know. Wow. Let's see. So again, a third roommate, which should really be the 4th, in the Winter Park apartment told Politico in a phone interview that Oliveira Santos told him that our Santos, had come to get the money for Trelha. The third roommate spoke on condition of anonymity because he was in the country as an undocumented immigrant. But of course, George Santos hates those because he's a Republican. But Trelha never heard from Santos after Santos visited him in Seattle, the third roommate said. He later learned from Elvira Santos that her attempts to contact Santos over the next few months were futile. So I'm a little bit confused here. He went to pick up the cash that he instructed Leda Elvira Santos, another roommate. And that's okay. I mean, I know he's got a sister, and that's not her. But okay. Anyway, wow, it's confusing. But I guess sometimes those criminal stories, they add, if you're just a habitual liar, you add those confusing elements just to try to trip up people who are trying to do the right thing and get the facts, right? No, that wasn't, not that roommate, another roommate. Another roommate? You had a fifth roommate? Yeah. His name was Frank Jones, Okay, now I think you're making things up. Trelha, in fact, realized he had been conned, he said, when no lawyer appeared, let alone El Chapo's. But he still didn't want to name Santos as a co-conspirator, fearing retaliation against Elvira Santos, who was also an undocumented immigrant, he said. So he's got 1, 2, 3, maybe, undocumented immigrant roommates at the time. And again, there's only 3 years between this and him running for Congress, but not just running for Congress as an anti-immigrant Republican. Anyway, Trelha told the federal authorities in the declaration that he had witnesses to support his statements. Elvira Santos declined to discuss the matter with Politico. I am available to speak with any American government investigator, Trelha wrote before providing his email address and cellular phone number and attesting that he signed the declaration willingly and truthfully. A federal prosecutor who handled Trelha's case described the scheme as sophisticated, adding that the Seattle portion was only the tip of the iceberg. So look out for the rest of the iceberg, I guess. Where's that? When are we going to see that? This, according to court records reported by CBS News, but a person close to the investigation who is not authorized to speak publicly, but I guess did anyway, and that's why they want to be anonymous, said they saw no evidence that prosecutors did forensic reports on Trelha's phone or seemed motivated to pursue the international co-conspirators. Okay. Well, not okay. I mean, that's bad, but very interesting. So yet another George Santos story to entertain us. And it's really kind of annoying that he continues to not only walk free among us, but serve in Congress. And he gets to vote on, federal legislation and everything. All right. Let's see. In another story, let Scott Anderson set the pace for now. He has sent us a couple of stories. And first of all, let me refresh Pocket so that I have both of them available. But the first one that he sent me earlier this morning, a major television news event involving the leadership of my state, in fact, Commonwealth of Virginia, that I declined to watch on television, but you know how it is about me watching events like this on television. I don't do it. So let's see. Who, what, where, when, why? It's Glenn Youngkin, Governor Fleece Vest, who was on CNN. I did see yesterday that he was, before he did it, I had heads up, that he was going to be doing a CNN town hall of some kind for some reason. Not really entirely sure why the people at CNN said, we got to cover the town hall of the governor of Virginia. Governor of Virginia is an important guy, but I mean, like CNN, I don't know. I guess they figured, what the hell, we'll take a look. And maybe we'll capture an embarrassing moment. And they sort of kind of did. Virginia governor stumbles as trans student confronts him on live TV. That's a good idea for trans students to use that opportunity. And well done here by this kid. GOP Governor Glenn Youngkin dodged the student's question about his anti-trans policies by Ben Blanchett. I'm reading from the HuffPost coverage of the event. And, I mean, it's a major league evasion of the question. And the sort of thing that probably like, and I don't know, in the British press or somewhere else where they're a little bit more aggressive, but here it's a town hall. They're letting, citizens do the engagement. And, I don't know, they probably don't feel as empowered and probably in fact are not as empowered to follow up on these things, but you'll see what we're talking about here. A transgender high school student's question for Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who has rolled back protections for trans students, got a dodge for the ages. That's a good phrase for it. Dodge for the ages at a CNN town hall event on Thursday night. The student, who goes by Nico, Niko, noted they're a transgender man and pressed Youngkin on his anti-trans policies, including proposals that would limit trans students' participation in athletics and usage of bathrooms, all the familiar tropes here. And by the way, there is video, I guess, of it, but there's also a video of an annoying ad that's now playing instead. But a still from the video that has a split screen of Nico and Glenn Youngkin reveals that they look a little bit alike. I mean, it doesn't mean anything in particular, but they kind of do look a little bit alike, and that's sort of interesting, and it becomes a little bit relevant as we hear a little bit about the discussion. So Nico, in asking his question or confronting Governor Youngkin here, says, do you think, and this is where it becomes relevant that they look a little bit alike, do you think the girls in my high school would feel comfortable sharing a restroom with me? Asked Nico. That's a good question as he stands there on camera with the mic in his hand. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you present as male. I really doubt they would be comfortable with that. So that's a tough question for somebody who has no real basis for his discrimination in the case of Glenn Youngkin, or nothing that he wants to cop to in public. And so without answering yes or no, Youngkin swerved into touting his belief in strong parent-child relationships. I mean, that's what he's there to talk about, right? But he's being held accountable for his policy. Well, I'm for strong parent-child relationships. Well, I'm for puppies and apple pie. But the question was about, do you think the girls in this guy's high school would be comfortable sharing a restroom with him? The answer is no. Everybody knows it, and you won't say it. And that's got to hurt your credibility to some extent. So here's the dodge for the ages. I believe, remember what the question is. Do you think the girls in my high school would feel comfortable sharing a restroom with me? Answer. I believe, first, when parents are engaged with their children, don't get engaged to your children, by the way. I think that's really awful. I believe, first, when parents are engaged with their children, you can make good decisions together. Yeah, good. I also think there are lots of students involved in this decision. Yeah, the ones who are going to the restroom. He went on to call for more school plumbing infrastructure. I mean, I've heard calls for more school infrastructure, but I don't know if I've ever really heard, well, I'm for more plumbing infrastructure. What does that mean? Of course, he's talking about, well, yeah, the girls would not be comfortable sharing a bathroom with you. So the answer is to build more bathrooms. Less doors, but more bathrooms, right? You can't have doors because then shooters will get in. I don't know how you're supposed to get into the bathroom without doors. There has to be at least one. And then, of course, there have to be doors on the stalls. This is a death trap, really, honestly. Already, Republicans would tell you. But, I mean, what an answer. I believe in more school plumbing infrastructure, including gender-neutral facilities so people can use the bathroom that they, in fact, are comfortable with. And I'm not opposed to the idea of having gender-neutral bathrooms in the schools. Of course, the issue that sometimes, several issues arise, only one of which is, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, Governor Youngkin, Governor Glenn Trumpkin guy says, I don't know, but I believe in more plumbing infrastructure. We're going to have a public-private partnership on raising money for school plumbing infrastructure. I'm sure he won't offer to pay for it or anything like that. But nice dodge, and there's more to it. He then goes on to say he claimed his policy on sports is clear and non-controversial, which it isn't, and supports progress made for women in sports. Again, I think these are very difficult discussions, and I am very, very glad to see you and your dad here together, said Youngkin, as CNN's cameras showed the two appearing to be disappointed by the response. Dad should have jumped up and said, how dare you assume my gender? I'm his mom. But all right. Well, anyway, the point really is that no answer is given. Do you think you think I should use the bathroom that matches my gender assigned at birth? Do you really think that? I mean, look at me and think about the girls in my high school, but not too much and not in that weird way. And then tell me, do you think they'd be happy? Do you think they think why can't I say his name? Governor Glenn Youngkin is a good guy, smart, and looking out for their interests when he says, yeah, my policy, because Donald Trump fans like it, my policy is that guy has to use the bathroom with you. See how smart I am? See how conservative I am? See how science-minded and reality-based I am? That's me, Governor Glenn Youngkin. Don't forget, vote Youngkin next time I have to run for something else because I can't run for governor again. Well, they're not gonna. And asked to explain why he has this stupid-ass policy, he says, I'm glad to see you and your dad here today. I think a lot of students were involved in these decisions. And there should be more plumbing, basically. Again, these are very difficult decisions. I'm very, very glad to see you and your dad here together. Okay. Twitter users noted Nico's dubious expression and criticized Youngkin for avoiding the student's question. That's fairly obvious. I think that's the end of the article text, but then there are a bunch of embedded tweets about the subject. And yeah, they're really basically it was pretty obvious what was going on. Let's see. One guy here, Neil Rockind, says of Youngkin's response, word salad, speech filler, stumble, filler, thank you. That's the basic summary of his answer here. One other person saying, I guess you can go and look up who said it in the various tweets rather than having me try and pronounce all their names. I kept waiting for Youngkin to actually answer the question. I mean, really answer the question. He never does. Youngkin brings up the idea of having a separate bathroom facility, but he never answers the question. The young man kept his composure. Don't know if I could. I might as well try and credit people with the things that they said. This is Tanzia Mill, who made this comment. Kim Eckert says, brave young man, coward old man. That's a good turn of phrase. Youngkin didn't answer his question, but he met his father. Kathleen Jones, everybody's got easy names today. Kathleen Jones says, well, that's a big roundabout with a non-answer. And Michael E., who says, with fancy footwork like that, Glenn should be on Dancing with the Stars, maybe just a tap dance solo. All right. Varying levels of response there, but interesting. Now it's on the record. Youngkin's first venture out. I guess CNN probably covered the town hall thinking it's an early look at a 2024 contender. And that's the only look you're going to get because that was a terrible, terrible performance. All right. What else has Scott sent us? Let's try this one before our break. Former Ohio House Speaker, and you'll never guess what party he's from, convicted in a $60 million bribery scheme. I think we've heard wind of this before when he was charged, but now he's convicted, and we'll have to add him to the GOP Republican squad thread that I used to keep on Twitter and has now moved, like everything else, to Mastodon. Who are we talking about? Former State House Speaker Larry Householder and former Ohio Republican Party Chair Matt Borges, is that the way he pronounces his name? Borges, were convicted yesterday, in a $60 million bribery scheme that federal prosecutors have called the largest corruption case in state history. A jury in, hold on a second, there's some pop-up in my way. Cincinnati, Ohio, found the two guilty of conspiracy to participate in a racketeering enterprise involving bribery and money laundering. Is that the name of the charge? That's too long. Or just bad description if it isn't. Anyway, after about 9, editors, please report to work. We need you. I'm going to have to read it verbatim, and you tell me. I think we all know what's going on here, but this is what passes for edited text at this point. A jury in Cincinnati found the two guilty of conspiracy to participate in a racketeering enterprise involving bribery and money laundering after about 9.5 half hours of deliberation over 2 days. I think that they probably mean 9.5 hours of deliberation over 2 days. And they went with, should I say 9.5 or should I say 9.5? You really should spell it out, I think, honestly, but 9.5. And then now you ended up with a little bit of both because you couldn't make up your mind. 9.5 half hours, what's the math on that, by the way? I'm curious. Gonna have to take out the calculator because what if they're serious about that? A half hour, of course, is 30 minutes times 9.5 is 285 minutes. We divide then by 60. That is 4.75 hours. That's 4 3/4 of an hour. 4 hours and 45 minutes divided over 2 days. That's probably not exactly how they handled it, but okay. I'm guessing 9.5 hours over 2 days. U.S. Attorney Kenneth Parker said the government's prosecution team showed that Householder sold the state house, and thus he ultimately betrayed the people of the great state of Ohio that he was elected to serve. He called Borges a willing co-conspirator. Through its verdict today, the jury reaffirmed that the illegal acts committed by both men will not be tolerated and that they should both be held accountable, Parker said. A very strong statement. By the way, it now occurs to me after all of taking out the calculator and everything. Of course, the math was obvious enough. I should have been able to do it in my head. Instead of 9.5 hours, you're talking about 9.5 half hours. How many hours would that be? The answer is half that number of hours. You really just have to divide 9.75 in your head, which, or 9.5 in your head, which might be, it might be too much to do while you're doing a radio show. But I mean, as I was thinking about it, like, oh yeah, well, duh, of course. You're just dividing the hours, the units in half. So anyway, sorry to all the mathematicians, although maybe you got a real kick out of listening to me actually do the calculations. All right. Attorneys for Householder and Borges, the guy who got convicted here, they did not immediately respond to messages left by the Associated Press on Thursday. And you can imagine why. They just lost a big case and they didn't really want to talk about it. Prosecutors alleged that Householder orchestrated a scheme secretly funded by Akron-based FirstEnergy Corporation to secure his power in the legislature, elect his allies, and then to pass and defend a $1 billion nuclear power plant bailout benefiting the electric utility. And by the way, it's more than prosecutors alleging it. Prosecutors succeeded in winning a conviction on it. And you can just go ahead and say that now, that Householder did do this thing according to the law. So you see what he did here. FirstEnergy Corporation donated him a bunch of money, I guess, got him elected to the legislature. Then he used their money, I suppose, to buy support, as leaders often do, from among the Republican conference there, and they made him their leader and then got himself elected Speaker of the House. And then he used that power to pass and then defend a $1 billion nuclear power plant bailout that went to FirstEnergy. I mean, they didn't give him $1 billion. They didn't need to. They only need to give him, I don't know, probably, well, what was the number? 60 million between him and the other guy, and then the people that they had to pass money out to. So if they get $1 billion bailout, but only spent 60 million to get it, I know 60 million sounds like a lot, but compared to $1 billion, it's, $1 billion's more. So, it's worth doing. Well, let's see. The prosecutors also alleged and convinced the jury that it was the case that Borges, then a lobbyist, sought to bribe an operative for inside information on the referendum to overturn the bailout. Oh, that's an interesting thing, too. That's the defending part. So the legislature awarded them $1 billion. The people of Ohio or somebody must have said, no. We have to undo this. More than likely a lobbyist for another electric utility company. Why should they get the $1 billion? We should get it. But somebody, I guess, initiated a referendum to overturn the bailout, and Borges bribed somebody for inside information about that referendum somehow so that they could defeat it at the ballot box because free and fair elections. Householder, 63, had been one of Ohio's most powerful politicians and twice elected speaker until the Republican-controlled House ousted him after his indictment from his leadership post, and then, in a bipartisan vote, and with Householder vigorously objecting, from the chamber. So he was actually expelled, huh? It was the first such expulsion in 150 years. He took the stand in his own defense, contradicting FBI testimony and denying that he attended swanky Washington dinners, where prosecutors allege he and executives of FirstEnergy hatched the elaborate scheme in 2017. What a year it was, 2017. This guy and FirstEnergy were hatching elaborate schemes in Washington, in swanky dinners in Washington, while in Washington state, George Santos was sending his accomplice to Seattle to skim credit cards. Who knew that the guy, and by the way, the small-time crook guy got to Congress, whereas the big-time crook guy was stuck in the Ohio state legislature. But he was a very powerful guy there. And some would probably imagine, and they'd be right, that he probably exercises more power there than going to be a backbencher in the federal Congress. Anyway, Borges, who is a mere 50 years of age, is who is the most convicted felon lobbyist / state legislators under 50. Well, Borges was until he burst through the deadline, and now he's off the list. Well, he did not testify at trial, but insisted he's innocent. Now he's not. Both men face up to 20 years in prison, so let's see what they actually get. The verdict comes 2.5 years after Householder, Borges, and 3 others were arrested. By the way, in case you were trying to convert that in your head, that is 5.5 years after they were first arrested, if you prefer those units instead. We'll be back with a little bit more after this. Twice. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's more to discuss about these guys. I hope you enjoyed our 2 half-minute breaks built into that whole thing. By the way, also, if you were wondering about the doorbell before, that was not El Chapo's lawyer. It wasn't one El Chapo lawyer, not 2 half El Chapo lawyers, nothing of the kind. But it was a service technician who we had been assured was not coming until after noon, and we had chosen the noon to 2 p.m. slot. Showed up. No, there is no such slot. This is 9 to 1 slot. And so I don't know why they promised us that, but oh well. That didn't go well. Where were we, though? Oh, yes, right. The verdict comes, as we found out, 5.5 years after Householder, Borges, and 3 others were arrested. Over the past 7 weeks, or alternatively, 14 half weeks, jurors at the trial were presented with first-hand accounts of the alleged scheme, as well as reams of financial documents, emails, texts, and wiretap audio. That is very exciting. By the way, just one more thing. I'm now obsessed with the units here. And it is a 7-week trial, as they mentioned. That is also 3.5 fortnights, in case you were wondering. And that's extraordinarily important to know as well. The prosecution called 2 of the people arrested, or one double unit of people who were arrested. The 2 others arrested here are Juan Cespedes and Jeff Longstreth. These 2, prosecutors said, both pleaded guilty, of course. And, oh, I see. They called 2 of the people. I was like, are they going to call them something? Like, they called them both stupid jerks But no, they called them to testify. I see. This is a bad sentence construction for a reading out loud by people who have ADHD and are going in 10 different directions. I don't have that. But I'm not diagnosed or anything like this. Sorry to all of those of you who are, including the 2 kids that I keep having to push along in school here. The prosecution called 2 of the people arrested to testify about political contributions that they said are not ordinary, but bribes intended to secure passage of the bailout bill known as House Bill 6. That was Cespedes and Longstreth are the 2 people that they called to testify. Householder's attorneys described his activities as nothing more than hardball politics. And I could see where that would be the defense. This is really close to the line. Is it bribery, or is it the legal kind of bribery where you give money to politicians and they deliver the things you want in exchange for the money? It's always very close, and it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between the ones that they think are A-OK and the ones that they think are prosecutable. But I say prosecute everybody and find out. That's fine. Jurors also heard taped phone calls, and it's often the tapes of phone calls that make the big difference here, where people say things like, this is really close to the line. Yes, but I love crime, so let's call it crime, and we'll do it the criminal way. All right, well, if you insist. Okay, that'd be a dumb thing to record, but I mean, so would lots of dumb things get recorded all the time. Very dumb people get involved in these things. Smart people say, I shouldn't crime. I just won't. I'll find another way. And dumb people, lazy people, whatever, say, meh, I should crime. I should go ahead and do it. And then in the middle, the vast bulk of, there's people who are like, I didn't realize that was a crime. If you're the certain kind of people, that's doesn't help you, and others somehow get away with it. You tell me why. Householders' attorneys describe his activities as nothing more than hardball politics. Jurors also heard taped phone calls in which Householder and another co-defendant, the late State House super lobbyist Neil Clark, late, like I guess he's dead, they plotted a nasty attack ad in this taped phone call and, in expletive-laced fashion, contemplated revenge against lawmakers who had crossed Householder. That's the sort of thing that'll get you convicted. Householder testified that he never retaliated against those who voted counter to his wishes or who donated to his rivals. Under a deal to avoid prosecution, FirstEnergy admitted using a network of dark money groups to fund the scheme and even bribing the state's top utility regulator, Sam Randazzo. So when does his trial begin? Interesting, though. I guess Householder is attempting the no harm, no foul defense. I plotted their deaths. I just didn't end up paying the hitman. Okay. Randazzo resigned as chair of the Public Utilities Commission in Ohio after an FBI search of his home, but he has not been charged and denies wrongdoing. Okay. So that's the latest, and that's the end of the article. It's not an extensive piece, but thanks to Scott for sharing it. It's always fun to keep up on what's going on in the state houses, where some of the most bizarre plots get hatched, both legislatively and, I guess, criminally as well. And I guess, speaking of which, since we're doing our reports on the states, now might be a fine time. And back when El Chapo's lawyer, or 2 half lawyers, rang the doorbell, this would have been a good time for this too. If I had thought of it, if I was home alone for today's emergency, I could have turned to the taped segment that I have here. Once again, thank you to Rosalyn MacGregor, who is informing us of what's going on in Michigan. But A, I wasn't home alone today, and B, I didn't think of it earlier. So now time to segue over to Michigan to catch up with the latest on what's going on there. Take it away, Rosalyn. Go.
Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Today I'd like to talk about how changes in a municipality's elected leadership can hollow out the dedicated appointed staff of professional public servants. Please direct your attention to East Lansing, Michigan, population over 47,000. As you know, Lansing is the state capital. East Lansing is immediately next door and is also the home of Michigan State University. In January, the City Council suddenly voted to terminate the employment of the professionally accredited city manager, George Lahanis, after more than 10 years. The severance agreement says, quote, East Lansing City Council has determined that it is in the best interest of the city to separate Lahanas's employment in order to go in a different direction in the management of the city. Let's fast forward to this week. To bring us up to date, I'll refer to the publication East Lansing Info. Quote, in what's become a fairly regular occurrence, East Lansing Info received an anonymous tip of another major resignation for the city of East Lansing's workforce. This time, it's Peter Menser. Menser had been functioning as the interim director of planning, a department that encompassed 5 units: building and permits, community and economic development, planning and zoning, parking, and rental housing. Menser is leaving to take a position with Delta Township. The city's plan is reported by sources to be temporarily to bring in East Lansing's former director of planning, Tim Dempsey, who left the city in 2019 to become a vice president with the private consulting firm Public Sector Consultants. When he left in 2019, Dempsey was succeeded by Tom Fehrenbach, but Fehrenbach just resigned in January to take a job with the state of Michigan. The city will have to now search for a new director of planning, something that will be challenging since the director of human resources and then the interim director of human resources both also quit recently. Menser's departure adds to the recent pattern in the city of East Lansing of having 2 layers of top administrators quit in single departments. Besides this happening in the planning department with Fehrenbach's and now Menser's departures, and also happening in the HR department with the departure of Shelley Newman and Ben Dawson, it also happened in the city clerk's office where both clerk Jennifer Schuster and deputy clerk Catherine Garner quit at about the same time. While the police department still has Chief Kim Johnson at the helm, East Lansing Info reported last week that Deputy Police Chief Chad Connolly has tendered his resignation. In a message to his colleagues, Connolly wrote, my reasons for leaving are varied, but I would be remiss not to emphasize that the turmoil at the governmental level and what I perceive to be unethical leadership and personnel decisions outside of the police department are major contributing factors. The planning department will be especially hit hard with Menser's departure. It also recently lost Community and Economic Development Administrator Adam Cummings and Senior Planner Darcy Schmidt. Additionally, Lizzie Frederick, the city's Community and Economic Development Associate, is leaving to take a job as Director of Owasso's Downtown Development Authority. Menser was working closely with the Planning Commission on efforts to clean up East Lansing's unusually complicated zoning code. He was also shepherding plans for renovations to Valley Court Park using a possible $1 million grant from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. The proposal with the MEDC requires a grant agreement to be hammered out by March 15th, but the design for adding a large pavilion to the park has remained controversial at the local level. It's unclear what happens with that next, given the turmoil. So I would like to say that local clerks, planners, and managers do thankless work. Towns need good people making good decisions to keep making forward progress. This is why it's important to pay attention to local races, particularly in off-year elections. That's my time for today. Back to you, David. Rosalyn MacGregor, your Michigan correspondent, signing off.
Okay. Well, thanks, Rosalyn. And I guess I want to read through some of the rest of these articles. So follow-up question. I see if I should have had you on here live. So what's going on in East Lansing with the city council? Are people what seems unclear to me, at least initially, is are people, I'm guessing, are they leaving because they have strong fundamental disagreements with the approach to governance that the new city council is going to take? Given that the stories earlier from you about what's happening in other areas of Michigan where people are ultra MAGA types are taking over local governance, I could see a new MAGA group coming into local government's not necessarily the case here in East Lansing, and I don't know. I mean, I would guess that it's less likely than it is in the other areas that we discussed earlier, but I guess it could also be that, they used to be pretty MAGA aligned, but a more progressive board maybe comes in and then they all start quitting. But either way, the point is that there's a lot of functionary part of government that can get fouled up either if, MAGA types take over and implement a why don't you just ist type of government, right? And people are just like, well, I'm just not going to be party to this. Or whether people come in with the idea of reform and they just think everybody in municipal public office, as bureaucrats, as they like to call them when they want to deride what they do, is corrupt or inept in some way, and they just come in with an attitude that makes it impossible for people to continue to do their jobs, and then they leave, which the council says, well, good, we wanted our own people in there anyway, but then they find out that 50 people are leaving, and they find that come the end of their relatively short term on the city council, nothing has happened and nobody wants to vote to reelect them because they didn't get anything done. And that was because they insulted all the people who do all the heavy lifting that actually make a municipal government run. And they left and they were never able to get back up to speed and accomplish anything. So, you walk a delicate, there's a delicate balance it's needed. You walk a fine line. And so to mix those metaphors, you walk a delicate balance when you are elected to any position of any kind like that. And point well taken from Rosalyn, that's true. There are dedicated professionals, longtime occupants of these offices in many cases that know, as they say, where all the bodies are buried and what levers to pull and buttons to push to make things work. And when you lose that institutional knowledge, you lose the ability to, implement the reforms for which you were supposedly elected. But it makes things tough because, of course, very often they will, the very same government functionaries will resist your reform efforts, and you won't be able to accomplish them that way with them in office, and you can't accomplish it with them out of office either. So, hey, this work is tough either way. So point well taken there. All right, back to Pocket to see what else I have to share with you, and there's a lot. Let's see. One thing that Greg sent me as he was exiting yesterday, but that I don't think we got a chance to discuss. But before we move on to that, which is international in its scope, I guess, we have some more news from our own country, America. Perhaps you've heard of it. And let me share this with you. I've got first, maybe we'll do the MSNBC report on it and then some reflection on it from over at Daily Kost's front page. But a Trump-related name from whom we haven't heard very much of late is back in the news over at, not just at MSNBC, but in the Maddow blog where Steve Bannon reigns. We got two sort of opinion takes on the same news. Former Trump lawyer admits post-election misrepresentations. What do you know? One of Donald Trump's high-profile lawyers pushed his post-election lies. She's now acknowledged that many of her claims simply weren't true. Okay, in what way? Let's find out. Steve Bannon writes, as recently as 2016... Jenna Ellis, that's who we're talking about. Jenna Ellis, remember her, was not a Donald Trump admirer. She repeatedly described the then candidate as an, quote, idiot, adding that she considered him an, quote, unethical, corrupt, lying, criminal dirtbag, unquote. Ellis even took aim at Trump's supporters, saying they didn't care about, quote, facts or logic. Okay. Ellis, nevertheless, joined Trump's legal team a few years ago, becoming a rather enthusiastic proponent, not only of her client's lies about his 2020 defeat, but also of radical tactics, we'll say, that's the word that he's using, that would allow the then president to remain in office, no it wouldn't, despite the election results. I just have to take issue with the semantics here. I don't believe that Steve Bannon actually feels this way, but it's sometimes interesting to see where language leads you, right? Trying to be, I guess, legally careful or something, but tiptoeing around what's actually going on here. That Ellis helps Trump with radical tactics. That's just illegal stuff, but radical tactics that would allow the then president to remain in office. It would not allow the then president to remain in office. It would have forced us to possibly accept him in office at the price of his purported ability to command perhaps the armed forces of the United States to enforce compliance with his coup or something like that. But it doesn't allow him to remain in office despite the election results. He's just taking it. And I know Steve Bannon would actually say, oh, yeah. I mean, that's actually what I believe. You're right. That's very awkward to say, but, I didn't mean it. Anyway, we later learned that Ellis also exchanged hundreds of text messages with then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in the run-up to January 6th, and then ultimately took the fifth in response to questions about those communications. Fifth Amendment, of course, not the fifth of the hundreds of text messages. Ellis was also ordered to testify before the special grand jury in Georgia that investigated alleged election interference efforts. But while much of the public has come to expect few consequences for Republican lawyers who engage in such tactics, as NBC News reported, Ellis has had to pay a price for trying to deceive the public. And now that's interesting, and I guess the reason now I recall why I opted to have both this and the Daily Kos entry to read to you about Jen Ellis. Like, it's pretty much going to be the same information, but some interesting takes here. And now, I still don't think that Steve Bannon thinks that, yes, that the radical tactics would actually have entitled Trump to stay in office. It just would have been the end result, though he was not allowed or entitled to do such a thing. But now I wonder, because they come to some opposite conclusions here, and Steve Bannon's a pretty sharp analyst as far as I know, right? But let me just contrast that last sentence with what's going on at Daily Kos. Bannon writes, while much of the public has come to expect few consequences for Republican lawyers who engage in such tactics, as NBC News reported, Ellis has had to pay a price for trying to deceive the public. Contrast that with the headline over at Daily Kos on Mark Sumner's piece. Jenna Ellis admits in court that she recklessly lied about 2020 election. Her punishment is nothing. We're going to have to sort this out. Let me begin by continuing with Steve Bannon here. He's quoting NBC News' reporting on Ellis's situation, which says, Jenna Ellis, an attorney who advised then President Donald Trump as he tried to overturn the 2020 election results, was censured for misconduct Wednesday by a Colorado Supreme Court judge. The Colorado Supreme Court's Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel said that Ellis violated a Colorado rule for professional conduct that prohibits misrepresentation by attorneys. To be sure, Bannon continues, Ellis is not the first lawyer in Trump's orbit to face this kind of scrutiny. As a Politico report noted, Rudy Giuliani's law license was suspended, while Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman are awaiting disciplinary proceedings. She also isn't the first election denier, or not just a lawyer, but first election denier to face court sanctions. And there's a linked article here, and I'm wondering whether it is the Mark Fincham story, because recall that that was the last time I think we called Steve Bannon's name, we were reading his coverage of Mark Fincham's story. I figured that was probably what he was alluding to. What makes this story, Ellis's, especially notable, however, is the fact that Ellis, as part of the legal proceedings, acknowledged that she didn't tell the public the truth. From the NBC News report, last month, Ellis's lawyer had filed a stipulation agreeing to a public censure of his client and acknowledging 10 misrepresentations in the aftermath of the 2020 election, including repeatedly claiming that the election was stolen from Trump. Ellis also acknowledged misleading comments stemming from claims she made on Fox Business about affidavits from witnesses, voter intimidation, and statistics that proved a, quote, coordinated effort to transfer votes from Trump to Biden. According to the signed stipulation, she made similar claims on Twitter. It's worth pausing, and we will, to appreciate the significance of such an acknowledgement. Pause. Is it really super significant? Well, let's see what he has to say about it. For one thing, this serves as a powerful reminder about the qualitative difference between how assorted partisans treat media interviews and legal proceedings. In this case, Ellis repeatedly peddled false claims about the former president's defeat, assertions she knew at the time weren't true, in a variety of settings. But when push came to shove, the attorney seemed to realize that while she expected to get away with lying on the air, she approached the Colorado Supreme Court's Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel in a more serious way. For another, to this day, the former president continues to lie about the 2020 election results as if his claims had merit. One of his former lawyers has now been forced to concede that while she peddled related rhetoric, the claims had no merit. That's actually the end of Bannon's article. Not particularly satisfying now that you know what's coming from Mark Sumner. Jenna Ellis admits in court that she recklessly lied about the 2020 election. Her punishment is nothing. And it's not nothing, but it's as close to nothing as you can get when you're thinking, these people really need to go to jail. And they really do. Jenna Ellis isn't the first name that comes up when thinking of attorneys for Donald Trump. But then with Sidney Powell plotting to take control of the voting machines, Rudy Giuliani heading to court to face charges of being, quote, a sexist sexual predator and abuser, Jeffrey Clark under investigation for his scheme to become Attorney General by overthrowing the government, John Eastman creating a blueprint for an American coup, and a whole legal team being hit with a $900,000 fine for a continuing pattern of misuse of the courts. That's understandable that she's not the first that comes to mind. It can be a challenge to stand out among such stars. Even in 2020, Ellis was known as the quiet member of Trump's elite legal strike force, which didn't mean she was ever less than awful. In addition to calling President Biden, 7-time Olympic medal winner Simone Biles, and gold medal winning soccer superstar Megan Rapinoe losers, she went on Facebook to call gay people vile and abominable. She also made a career out of lying about her career, falsely claiming to be a constitutional law professor, and frequently appearing as an expert on areas in which she had neither experience nor training. Now Ellis's lies have finally caught up to her. On Wednesday, a disciplinary judge appointed by the Supreme Court of Colorado issued a censure for lies Ellis promoted while working for Trump. And if you recall, the MSNBC telling of it was that it was a Colorado Supreme Court justice who issued the censure. But I guess, this alleges that it was a disciplinary judge appointed by the Supreme Court of Colorado, which is a slightly different thing. While serving as senior legal advisor to the then President of the United States and as counsel for his re-election campaign, Jenna Lynn Ellis, the respondent, repeatedly made misrepresentations on national television and on Twitter, undermining the American public's confidence in the 2020 presidential election. The parties stipulate that respondents' misconduct warrants public censure, and the presiding disciplinary judge, i.e. the court, approves the parties' stipulation. The complaint against Ellis focuses on at least 10 incidents in which she made statements while working as Trump's attorney, either on television or on social media, in which she made false claims about the election. That list includes claims of having affidavits that didn't exist. That's pretty bad. Witnesses that never came forward, and proof of election fraud that she never produced. Some of these statements were vague, i.e., quote, we will present testimonial and other evidence in court to show how this election was stolen. Others were explicit. We have over 500,000 votes in Arizona that were cast illegally. All of them were simply lies. What may be most remarkable is that Ellis agreed they were lies. Not only that, she agreed that they were made with a reckless state of mind. And this comes from the court's documents here, that respondent, through her conduct, undermined the American public's confidence in the presidential election, violating her duty of candor to the public. Finally, the parties agree that 2 aggravators apply. Respondent had a selfish motive, and she engaged in a pattern of misconduct. In other words, Ellis admitted that she lied, that she did so recklessly, that she did it repeatedly, that she did it for selfish reasons, that it was done in violation of the rules surrounding her role as an attorney, and that it undermined public confidence in the election. That is quite an admission. For all this, Ellis will get what amounts to a black mark on her permanent record. Oh my God, that sounds like... we need dramatic music for that. Black mark on your permanent record, my stars. Well, that's not really quite all that much. That's it, as a matter of fact. She remains a practicing attorney, quote, in good standing. Let that be a lesson to you, attorneys who lie repeatedly in ways that threaten the whole damn nation. In the spirit of all Trump supporters caught red-handed, she's also right back on Twitter, showing her contrition. And here embedded is her tweet from yesterday. The politically motivated left failed miserably in their attempt to destroy me. They're now trying to falsely discredit me by saying I admitted I lied. That is false. I would never lie. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Well, how do you like that? That's I didn't even get to finish Jenna Ellis's actual the entirety of her tweet, but as Mark Sumner puts it here, in the spirit of all Trump supporters caught red-handed, she's right back on Twitter showing her contrition. And again, remember that we were just told, well, it's extraordinary. She admitted that she lied. She immediately goes to Twitter and said, I didn't lie, and I don't admit that I lied. The politically motivated left, as she says, failed miserably in their attempt to destroy me. She was censured by the Colorado Supreme Court, but that's not enough because, of course, she gets to continue doing what she wants to do. She's still a lawyer. They're now trying to falsely discredit me by saying I admitted I lied. That is false. Of course, she did, in fact, stipulate that she lied in her filings. But I didn't admit it. My lawyer admitted it. I agreed to let my lawyer admit it, but I don't know. That is false, and I would never lie. Lying, she says, requires intentionally making a false statement. I never did that, nor did I stipulate, and that show more. I mean, should we go and see? I think he just took a screenshot of it rather than, but I guess there is a link. And what else does she have to say for herself? Just kind of curious about how crazy it gets. Oh my goodness, it goes on and on. I never did that, nor did I stipulate to or admit that. And she's got this enormous long text here, but that's because she is a Twitter Blue subscriber, as Mark notes here. Ellis is, of course, a Twitter Blue member, so her full response sprawls on at length, explaining how her lie wasn't really a lie because it was just, quote, dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. Somehow she believes that does not mean lie, or lie. I mean, there's just 4 different kinds of lies, 8 half different kinds of lies, in case you were trying to keep up. And, all right. Well, I mean, she's kind of dumb, really, honestly. She's just really just not all that together. The lengthy response, I'm kind of curious about it now, says, right, lying requires intentionally making a false statement. I never did that, nor did I stipulate to or admit that. Yes, you did. As has become sadly typical, the opposition-controlled media is intentionally twisting the truth, conflating the full RPC standard with the actual stipulation. The standard reads dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. The Colorado Bar Council and my council concluded it was best to resolve the bar complaints by agreeing to a public censure. Bar complaints have been filed all over the country by people Trump lawyers have never met, had no client relationship with, and who are totally partisan against Trump. This is and always was political lawfare to intimidate lawyers from representing Trump or Republican candidates, especially in election challenges, and try to destroy our livelihood and reputation. Organizations filing complaints have been open about this motivation. I am grateful to have this behind me, thankful to the Colorado OARC and the PDJ for treating me fairly in spite of immense political pressure, and to my lawyers who have stood by me and given me wise counsel, and I remain in good standing and fully licensed by the state of Colorado. That part is true. I'll continue speaking truth, no you won't, to the best of my ability, you have none, and zealously advocating for due process, you don't know what it means, having learned I can do so in media even more carefully while never backing down to the political opposition mob who would seek to destroy me, my vocation, my mission, and my voice. Not today, not ever, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense from their own, and, okay. So gobbledygook from Ellis and an insistence that she didn't admit to what she had to admit to in order to get to this stage in the proceeding. It couldn't have happened if she had not admitted this, which is further evidence that she did. And that's evidence if you don't like things like signed documents that say, I just did that. In any case, Mark continues, she immediately returned to attacking Dr. Anthony Fauci, promoting a conspiracy theory that President Joe Biden has brain damage, and making fun of Mitch McConnell's fall. That's all spaced out with some Bible quotes, because she's just that Christian. Ellis's word has always been her bond, where bond means whatever it takes to collect a paycheck and a dash of attention on any given day. As CNN noted, back in 2016, Ellis repeatedly called Trump an idiot, as well as a bully. She said the statements that he made were disgusting and that he was not a real Christian, and had this to say about Trump supporters. I could spend a full-time job, good writing, just responding to the ridiculously illogical, inconsistent, and blatantly stupid arguments supporting Trump. But here's the thing. His supporters don't care about facts or logic. They aren't seeking truth. Trump probably could shoot someone in the middle of New York City and not lose support. And this is the cumulative reason why this nation is in such terrible shape. We don't have truth seekers. We have narcissists. Yeah, we do have a couple of those, don't we? If anything, Ellis was astoundingly prescient, as everything she ascribed to Trump supporters almost perfectly described where she would go by 2020. Unsurprisingly, it was just over a year later when Ellis was on television as a, quote, legal analyst, supporting Trump and attacking the Department of Justice for their investigation into his campaign. In fact, it was her willingness to ignore those old facts and logic and her enthusiastic disregard for the truth that put her here on the fast track to becoming part of Team Trump. As the New York Times pointed out in 2020, Ellis was not exactly a legal superstar when Trump tapped her for his elite team. She wasn't even a candle. Her credentials as a constitutional law attorney seemed to have been pulled straight from her nethers, though she did claim to be a professor of constitutional law while writing for a right-wing rag, the Washington Examiner. The truth was that the only teaching Ellis had done was a couple of semesters of teaching pre-law classes for undergraduates at Colorado Christian as an affiliate faculty member. However, she had the one vital quality required by Trump. Those who know Ms. Ellis, it is quoted here, said they imagined that her willingness to say almost anything in the president's defense was what he found appealing about her. The Supreme Court of Colorado agrees. Too bad they also agreed that it wasn't worth even a slap on the wrist. That is too bad. And so differing views of whether she actually took a punishment there or not, including a differing view by her. She says, no, I wasn't punished. I didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't even admit to anything. So, yeah, huge victory there for the Supreme Court of Colorado. All right, well, let's see. There's a couple other things that I wanted to squeeze in here. Let's see. How far back do I have to scroll to get to some of these? Some further news on what's going on. It's still not clear why there isn't more reporting about this and why this isn't a bigger deal. But I guess more legal trouble for super jerk asses Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl. Really two of the worst people out there, and I just don't know why they're out there and not in jail instead. But I guess we're getting closer. Lawandcrime.com reports on this one. Adam Klasfeld is the name on the byline here. Right-wing hoaxers' robocalls targeting black voters, we heard about those a while ago, violated the Voting Rights Act and the KKK Act, a federal judge rules. Are we getting anywhere with these guys? Right-wing activists Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman's robocalls targeting black voters violated the Voting Rights Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act, and the question isn't close enough to require a jury, a federal judge ruled. What does that mean? That means we're back at the summary judgment stage. Remember, that's becoming a big issue these days. We're hearing a lot about that. Let's see. The court recognizes that the free exchange of ideas on issues of public concern and the ability to engage in robust political discussion constitute the foundations of a democratic society. Senior U.S. District Judge Victor Marrero wrote in a 111-page order on Wednesday. So it's nice that they recognize that. I think that's a good start, but what does this mean? Marrero nonetheless found that the evidence establishes that the neighborhoods that the defendants targeted were not accidental or random, finding that a reasonable jury couldn't escape the conclusion that the pair wanted to deny the right to vote, specifically to black voters. Okay. Evidence was just too strong. I mean, what else would they be doing if they were targeting black neighborhoods and texting one another about why they were targeting these neighborhoods? Because they're black. Let's make sure that they think the wrong things about the election. Well, no reasonable jury could get around that, so I guess summary judgment at that point. Next section, goofballs and political hucksters. That's kind, I think, is describing the two of these. The ruling spells victory without a trial for the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, or NCBCP, a civil rights group that sued Wohl and Berkman in the Southern District of New York before the 2020 presidential election. New York Attorney General Letitia James, who joined the lawsuit, said in a statement on Wednesday saying, yeah, it does say that, your vote is your voice, and I am proud that today the court ruled in our favor to uphold the most important cornerstone of our democracy. Wohl and Berkman engaged in a disgraceful campaign to intimidate black voters, using threats and lies to keep them from making their voices heard in an attempt to secure the election for their preferred presidential candidate. I will always stand fierce in defense of New Yorkers' right to vote, and anyone who attempts to take away that right will be met with the full force of the law. Well, have they been? Wohl and Berkman have been tied to multiple political hoaxes targeting perceived rivals of former President Donald Trump, including then Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Anthony Fauci, and ex-special counsel Robert Mueller. Prosecutors, regulators, and common citizens claimed the duo crossed the line with 85,000 robocalls sent out nationally to such locations as New York, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. Recorded by a woman identifying herself as Tamika Taylor, the robocalls largely targeted diverse regions with the false message that if you vote by mail, your personal information will be a part of the public database that will be used by police departments to track down old warrants and will be used by credit card companies to collect outstanding debt. It's not actually hard to believe any of that. And it's not always all that far from the truth. They just won't be doing it with the vote by mail database yet. Anyway, I mean, it makes it for an effective political tactic for them to do this. Though Wohl and Berkman painted themselves as goofballs and political hucksters with an irreverent sense of humor, Judge Marrero rejected that the robocalls were mere hyperbole. In addition to the specific harms that the call threatened, defendants dressed the call with a veil of legitimacy to mislead its listeners into believing the statements in the call were true. Marrero added, the robocall framed Wohl and Berkman's organization, Project 1599, as a, quote, civil rights organization, with a name reminiscent of the 1619 Project, an initiative of the New York Times that sought to recognize and commemorate the history of the first slave ship that carried enslaved Africans into the United States. The stunt also led to criminal prosecution. In the Ohio case, Wohl and Berkman were sentenced to spend 500 hours registering voters living in low-income neighborhoods in the Washington, D.C. area. That was after they pleaded guilty to a felony count of telecommunications fraud. Another case in Michigan remains pending, but that too, just a slap on the wrist, really. These guys belong in jail. Next section, angry black callbacks. Even the persona of the, quote, black activist, the judge noted, was mistaken by some news organizations actually, wow, as a reference to, you need the word here, to Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer. The call markedly lacked any outlandish details or other cues that may indicate to an ordinary listener that it should not be taken seriously, Marrero noted. In October of 2020, Marrero compared the robocalls to the Ku Klux Klan's tactics in a court order denouncing Wohl and Berkman's electoral terror. That's a quote. In the current version of events, the means that Berkman and Wohl used to intimidate voters, though born of fear and similarly powered by hate, are not guns, torches, burning crosses, and other dire methods perpetrated under the cover of white hoods, the judge found at the time. Rather, Berkman and Wohl carried out electoral terror using telephones, computers, and modern technology adapted to serve the same deleterious ends. That motion, however, was simply for a temporary restraining order, preventing the pair from engaging in further robocalls and forcing them to send curative messages informing the recipients of the ruling. Since that time, Marrero said, emails showed that they planned to send the robocalls to, quote, black neighborhoods. The robocall script itself also contained racially coded language and was imbued with numerous harmful racial stereotypes about the black community in an effort to target black voters, Wednesday's ruling states. Further, each of the threatening messages contained in the robocall also relied on harmful stereotypes of black people related to interactions with the criminal justice system, the amassing of debt, and resistance towards medicine. If there were any doubts of the intentions, Marrero said, all were eliminated by Berkman's message to Wohl, expressing his satisfaction that he was receiving angry black callbacks. NCBCP, I remember the civil rights organization, Attorney General James and the robocall recipients have 20 days now to submit their requests for damages, attorney fees, and costs. The Attorney General's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Neither did Wohl's counsel. So that's where it currently stands. Still no, I guess, criminal prosecution at this stage. But are we just talking about this as just a civil liability? I mean, I just can't figure out what it takes to put people like this in jail where they really belong. That's the better restraining order, if you ask me. All right, let's see. Definitely have a couple other things to try to squeeze in here. I don't think I'm going to read through this whole thing. This goes into excruciating detail, but I'm not sure exactly how to edit it. But from Tennessee, the Tennessee Holler has some brand new information to share with us. We learned and then were reminded recently that Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee signed all of these anti-trans and anti-drag bills and then was, of course, confronted with photos of himself just in good fun in drag when he was in high school, in front of minors and everything, where you could be, it can be safely assumed, according to your version of events and your version of the law, that that's grooming going on and we should arrest you as a child molester. But hey, let bygones be bygones. It turns out that the lieutenant governor has his own issues and his own issues to deal with now, as they report at the Tennessee Holler that the anti-LGBTQ Tennessee Lieutenant Governor McNally, I guess his name is Randy McNally. Is that right? Randy McNally? That can't be right. The Globe guy? And not really him, obviously, but okay. Now that makes me wonder. But anti-LGBTQ Tennessee Lieutenant Governor McNally comments on racy Instagram pics of a young gay male. Apparently, frequents the Instagram account of this young guy who is quite obviously and quite openly not only gay, but loves illustrating that fact by posting racy pictures of himself, as is his right, of course, to do. But and it's also Randy's right to comment on these pictures, I guess. But it's odd that he spends so much time doing so, and in approving fashion, by the way, and yet holds himself out in public as anti-LGBTQ. We can start, I guess, with the update to the story. I guess they thought it was important enough to put it up at the top. Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, that's his name, Rand McNally. Randy McNally has issued a statement blaming us, the Tennessee Holler, I guess, for calling out his hypocrisy, but importantly, not denying that he's the one who made these comments, not claiming that he was hacked, and not blaming an underling. You can watch our interview with Franklin, the man in the pics, here at this link, or listen to their podcast. And I guess I would recommend that you do so, because it's an interesting story. Tennessee, the story body begins, is currently leading the nation in anti-LGBTQ hate, with 26 anti-LGBTQ bills moving through the legislature. Last week, Governor Lee made national news for quickly signing a cruel trans youth health care ban and the nation's first drag show felony bill, which threatens to lock up drag performers. What made the bill even more absurd was the revelation that Governor Lee himself had dressed in drag on a school campus in front of minors back in 1977. Drag for me, felony for thee. Lee's hypocrisy made him a laughingstock, even getting him sent up on Saturday Night Live. I missed that. Well, hang on to your hats, folks, because it turns out Lee isn't the only huge hypocrite at the highest levels of Tennessee's government. Enter Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, and it makes me wonder whether maybe he is, in fact, related to Rand McNally, and they differentiate between him and the younger kids by calling him Randy. But I don't even know. Maybe Rand McNally wasn't a person's name. Maybe that was a firm that produced those maps and globes. Partnership between Mr. Rand and Mr. McNally. I have no idea. I never looked that up. Now I feel like I have to. You'll have to do it. We'll do it after the show. Well, anyway, enter Randy McNally here, who it turns out has been openly leaving heart emojis and other encouraging comments under very racy pics on the Instagram page of a young gay male aspiring performer named Franklin McClure, who grew up in Knoxville. McNally is from Oak Ridge, but represents parts of Knoxville, where he lives with his wife, Janice. Well, of course he represents parts of Knoxville. He's the lieutenant governor. Did they have a different structure in Tennessee? Is the lieutenant governor a member of the legislature and doesn't occupy a statewide office? I don't know. Or maybe he did represent it and he moved from state representative to, I don't know. Well, I'm confused about that. But that's not the main point of the story. They have, as it turns out, 2 adult daughters. McNally, it notes, I guess, helpfully, that is Roman Catholic. I don't know what that tells us, but I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. We were alerted to the pics by an anonymous Twitter user who came across them, someone who knew of Franklin and was entertained by his page. They sent us screenshots and told us where to find them. We were in disbelief. Sure enough, there they were, and still are, at this writing. You can visit Franklin's page. It's linked here under the moniker Franklin Superstar, and he spells it Franklyn, Franklin Superstar. If you are interested in seeing just how racy the pics are, or maybe you just enjoy seeing racy pics and figured you'd add it to your collection, I don't know. McNally repeatedly used his verified account to post underneath some of Franklin's raciest pictures. McNally is apparently very big on heart and flame emojis. That's interesting. Underneath a few Franklin and McNally exchange comments, apparently they seem to know one another. McNally even calls Franklin by the name Finn, his nickname, which is not mentioned anywhere on his page, and speaks to a definite familiarity between them. Franklin says they've never met in person. More screenshots of the exchanges here. Knowing McNally would surely claim to be hacked when we posted about this, we decided to call up Franklin to hear details from him directly. Franklin is currently 20 years old. He grew up in Knoxville, which McNally represents parts of, but no longer lives there. He says he and McNally became friends on Facebook through mutual friends a few years back, and the McNally got Franklin's Instagram from there and has been commenting for a while now. About his pictures, which are revealing, Franklin says, "My body is art. I like to use it the way God intended." Okay. Franklin told us he always found it a bit random that the Lieutenant Governor of Tennessee was commenting on his page. I mean, and that's the account he uses is Lieutenant Governor McNally, LTGOVMCNALLY, Lieutenant Governor McNally, and it's checkmarked and everything. So yeah, he found it a bit random that the Lieutenant Governor of Tennessee was commenting on his page, but since he's not a political person, he didn't make the connection that McNally was simultaneously helping to spearhead a deeply anti-LGBTQ legislature, which is pushing the most anti-LGBTQ bills in the country. About the way McNally posted on his page, Franklin told us he has never taken what appears to be flirting seriously. I just thought he was older and out of touch. I've always taken it as a compliment. I don't dislike him or think he's a bad person. He's one of the only people who has consistently uplifted me and made me feel good. But when we told him about the drag show felony bill and the anti-trans youth health care bill and so many of the other bills snaking their way through the Republican supermajority-led legislature, Franklin agreed that was wrong, saying it's wrong to ban drag, wrong to ban anything that isn't hurting anyone. I don't support hate of any kind. We asked Franklin if at any point he thought McNally may have been hacked, and he said the thought had crossed his mind, but since they had become friends back in 2020, he understandably assumes McNally's team would know by now if that was the case. They would be aware by now if he was hacked. It's evident he's not hacked. It's worth noting the comments that McNally made on Franklin's page stretch back months ago. Add to that the fact that Franklin says he's been messaging with McNally for years. And let's just say, if this is the work of hackers, they're the most patient hackers ever. The main point Franklin wanted to get across was that he has no animosity toward Randy McNally. I don't hate him. I don't dislike him. I don't have a negative opinion on him. I've had a transformation since we started talking. I was more Christian. Now I'm more not Christian. We were friends back before I was more openly myself, before I was posting things more mature. If he's hitting on me, it's real out of touch hitting on me. Franklin's appreciation for McNally is clearly genuine, while McNally may be supportive of Franklin, when it comes to the LGBTQ community in Tennessee, he's anything but. As with the governor's drag pass, the hypocrisy on display here is yet again jaw-dropping. We don't judge Randy for liking Franklin's pictures. In fact, we're glad he does. We just wish McNally and Tennessee Republicans would stop the hate and treat everyone in Tennessee's LGBTQ community in the supportive way Lieutenant Governor Malley treats Franklin on Instagram. Instead, Tennessee Republicans have made hate their number one priority this session to distract from all the different ways this Tennessee GOP supermajority is failing our state, with outcomes at the bottom in poverty, violent crime, health, per pupil spending, and so much more. The hate is simply a distraction that they use to cling to power, and they don't care what it does to our most vulnerable communities. What a better state we would have if we all accepted each other for who we are and supported one another. And speaking of support, of course, Franklin adds that he would be appreciative of any support you all are willing to give him on TikTok, or better yet, Venmo. And so puts all that stuff out there. And, hey, while you're out there supporting people, Netroots Radio, Kagro in the Morning, good place to be in terms of making your support known. We thank everybody, of course, who does. And it's time for us to remind everybody once again and see if another flood of new donations and boosts come in. And by the way, let's expand the listenership as well. Bring new people in, introduce them to the podcast. Let people know on social media how much you enjoy it and include links to it, and see if we can't pull and rope a few more in. And then it won't have to be you all the time boosting your contributions. We can bring in new people. I really appreciate everyone's support here. And just a part of being a social media presence, I guess, is asking for that support. Okay. So there you have it. The governor, some stuff in his background. The lieutenant governor, some stuff in his more current background, I guess. And, I don't know. I guess they'll never be called to account because Republicans are gimmitarians, and one rule for you and another for me, and I guess that's the way it goes. And is illustrated in numerous times over and over again in today's stories. Still stuff I didn't get to. Still didn't get to that international relations story that Greg pointed out, but maybe we'll hit that on Monday. In the meantime, you need to have yourself a rest for the weekend, and you can start off by enjoying the Blue Moon Spirits Friday program of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. Here's what he's got in store for you. Hey, if Trump is going to be criminally charged, it will be this year. That would be good. Hope so. On the rest of the menu, House Republicans opened a new attack on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A backlash by powerful national business groups is pushing conservative Republicans to weaken their anti-ESG proposals. I need to tune in just to find out what that is. And National Highway Traffic Safety Administration regulators are turning up the heat on Tesla. How do you like that? Internationally, there's news too. I can squeeze that in after this short message.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what we got on tap internationally. Egypt's inflation has spiked again, hiking prices of basic food items, and Georgia's governing party is withdrawing a foreign agents law that opponents warned would usher in Russia-style repression. All that and more on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. Stay tuned.